You are now tuned in to The Daily Dose, a daily podcast produced by the Minority Cannabis Business Association, focused on trending headlines in the cannabis industry and how they will affect minority entrepreneurs who are risking it all to make the jump from the legacy market into the regulated cannabis industry. If you support an equitable cannabis industry, then you're an ally of MCBA, and we want you to join the movement for a better tomorrow. Now sit back and relax. We've got your Daily Dose loading up. Special shout out to this month's sponsor of the show, Indiva Advisors. You can check them out at indivaadvisors.com. They are a leading accounting firm dedicated to the cannabis industry. They navigate complex tax, financial, and regulatory changes to make sure that your business is compliant and efficient. They focus on you so you can focus on your business. You can check them out at indivaadvisors.com. That's INDIVA advisors.com. Now we'll get right into today's headlines and today's Daily Dose.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 26 of the Daily Dose. It's your girl, Precious Osagi Arese, Communications Manager for MCBA. Thank you guys for joining us today. So today on episode 26, we have a headline coming out of Marijuana Moment that discusses where America thinks federal legalization should go. So the article titles, Majority of American Voters, including most Republicans, back federal marijuana legalization and social equity. Now, this was very interesting because we all know that our world, our country is always at this sort of like racial divide or racial imbalance, or even just political divide when it comes to major social issues. But it seems like one thing that majority of Americans are kind of coming together on, and from this poll, we'll get into it, whether you're Republican, Democratic, Independent, whatsoever, they're coming all around for legalization, to support federal legalization across the board. Now, that's pretty interesting to me because, as we all know, cannabis legalization needs to be preempted or even, really just consist of equity policies. And we've seen on a state level how sometimes when those equity policies are calling for large social justice rehauls in a Republican set state, a lot of those equity policies are removed. So to see on a federal level that folks are feeling the opposite way, regardless of what side of the aisle they stand on, it's pretty interesting. So let's take a deep dive into this article. The link is in the comments if you want to follow along. So it says a strong majority of American voters, including most Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, support legalizing marijuana and the federal level, according to a new poll, and majority also back policies meant to promote equity in the industry. The survey from Data for Progress found that 65% of Americans are in favor of federally legalizing cannabis. And this is also pretty consistent with polls that have been conducted over the last couple of years. So showing that there is a trend for support behind legalization. Now, it also breaks down certain key elements of equity policies that folks supported and from all over the spectrum. And I wanted to get into a few. So about 75% of Democrats, 67% of independents, and 52% of Republicans agree that cannabis prohibition should end. What I also liked about this survey is that it pulled out some key questions about cannabis reinvestment and cannabis licensing. And in one of the polls, it found that, where is this number here? 57% said that they'll like to see licenses given to those from individuals who were disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition. So making the New York program a mandated federal program. 57% of people. That's a large number because it's a little bit more than half the country who are saying, look at the New York model, how they set aside licenses preemptively just for those who were impacted by the war on drugs, and those who qualify for social equity. They think that should be a federal mandate. Even moving further down into cannabis funds and who and where should those funding go to. we're also seeing about 65% of likely voters in favor of other proposals to direct a sizable portion of cannabis tax revenue to a grant fund for nonprofit SAN governments to support. So the article also goes down to break in a little bit more details about other questions that it polled and getting those answers. But overall, it's literally showing us the trend that, when federal legalization comes, it won't be this large surprise to the general public. We're already at more than half of the United States legalized, whether for medical or recreational. We all think it's not a matter of if, merely so when federal legalization will happen. And it's good to know that there's a lot of ground support. And I think that ground support comes from the grassroots level, from advocates, from operators, and so on and so forth, who are doing the work, educating their local officials, who are then educating their state officials, who are then going to the federal government and showing how a cannabis market is working specifically in their state. Now, for those who've been following cannabis legalization on a federal level, we've taken a couple stabs at it. From the MORE Act, we have the HOPE Act, which deals with a lot more social justice issues. There have been instances to really figure out what federal legalization will look like. So I tell people, soon come. And not to mention, on top of this headline, and I mentioned this on our last Daily Dose, to look at some of the other micro stories that are happening, or micro elements that are happening that build a larger federal legalization argument. Like, for instance, there's a Republican representative out in Florida who was pushing for 280E to be rescheduled from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 to allow for more research around the medical side of the plant and to begin to, pull down 280E taxes to make this industry a lot more feasible for folks to operate in. Again, I think all of these small elements are what are coming together to build the bigger picture of federal legalization happening in the next, next election, 2 elections. The timeline has always been what is sketchy. But again, something we all know is just that it's a matter of when. As again, we're seeing so many markets thrive. Massachusetts just had a $4 billion overall since this market launched. New Jersey is heading towards their $1 billion mark. Illinois is doing well. And again, there's starting to be a really large push on new states that are legalizing on what social equity should look like. So with that, that's all I have for you today. It's interesting because our SBES, which is coming up on February 22nd, we'll be talking about a lot of these new states. We'll talk about Maryland, Missouri, New York, Connecticut. We'll look at their policies, what they're doing to engage social equity, and we'll also break down what you as an operator can do to get into those states right at the very beginning or be a part of the conversation. So we have a lot of great guests coming on for that. So make sure you guys are signing up and getting registered. Till then, have a great Thursday, and thank you for joining us on the Daily Dose. Bye.